Well, it definitely appears somebody's not having a fun day out on the water. Welcome back, crew, to Boats vs. Haulover. Typically, we're man and machine take on Mother Nature down at Haulover Inlet, but as you can already tell, we are not at Haulover, we are at Delray Beach, and many of you have probably seen some of this story already. And this is a 2017 Viking 92 open bridge convertible. And this vessel found itself in a little bit of trouble right off the coast of Delray Beach. Now, according to the most recent statement released by Viking, which states that on November 3rd, 2023, a 2017 Viking 92 open bridge convertible departed Palm Beach Inlet en route to Fort Lauderdale. When within an hour of departure, the 92C encountered a fuel interruption to the generators and then encountered a fuel interruption to the main engine as well, causing the boat to be set adrift. Now, in Viking's statement, they do answer one of the most common questions we get about this incident as well, which was, why didn't they deploy the anchor before they wound up on the beach? Well, according to Viking's statement, the crew worked to try and get power restored to the vessel. Once they determined they were not going to be able to do so, the crew actually did go and try to deploy the anchor by releasing the brake. But according to the statement, it states that the Devil Claw was actually still attached at the time of the deployment, causing it to get lodged in the deployment chute, rendering the anchor unusable, thus causing this vessel to wind up basically in the position that we see here. Here we can see that Towboat is out doing what they can to try and get this thing freed up, but they're battling several issues at the moment. One, it is pretty rough. There's probably 4 to 5 foot seas offshore, which also didn't assist in the fact that this boat wound up on the beach. But it's causing all kinds of issues as the towboats actually try and get the vessel off. And also, the vessel wound up beaching at extremely close to high tide, which means they're working against a clock now as the tide's continually going out as they try and get this boat off the beach. The other part of this that is really causing havoc as they try and free the boat is the actual weight of the vessel itself. I know in these images it looks big, but I'll tell you what, the images do not do this boat justice. It is absolutely massive, and the amount of fuel, water, and other supplies that are on the vessel just add to the weight, keeping it in a spot where it's extremely difficult to move, and Towboat winds up snapping multiple lines as they try and get this boat off. Now, I do have to give this crew credit. They never really quit trying on this one, even though they're battling a lot of different things, the biggest one being time as the tide continues to go out. They're pretty determined to attempt to get this vessel off this beach and get it off this beach now. So we see them make multiple attempts, attaching different lines, trying over and over again to get this thing free. And it really is a very difficult and dangerous operation. Here we're going to see how they're getting the lines from the boat back to the beach to attach to the yacht. They have their diver actually swim out, meet one of their tow vessels, and then they pass the line off to the diver so he can bring it back into the beach. Now, the diver is having to do all this without a life jacket or any sort of protective gear. Partially due to the rough sea conditions, he's having to duck dive under the waves to actually get out to meet the vessel. But on top of that, he then has to bring these extremely heavy lines back to the beach, all adding to the danger of the operation. And then to top it off, we have the towboats themselves actually having to operate their vessels in the breakers, meaning that they're taking waves over the side, the bow, the stern of the vessel the whole time as they try and pass the line off. But here we can see they brought in one of the bigger tugboats to actually try and pull this boat off, adding a little more horsepower than the smaller vessels they've been using up until this point. So they're getting the line out to the diver, and they're going to give it another attempt with the bigger, stronger vessel to see if they can get it out. And here you can see the dangers we're talking about the vessels operating in the middle of the breakers. Here they had to bring the tow line in enough so the diver could get access to it, but as we can tell, they're in the middle of the breaking waves at this point in time. They're in the danger zone for sure. And here you're going to see they start to point the bow back toward the waves themselves, but as they do this, they do wind up taking several waves over the bow, It is just a dangerous spot where somebody could be washed overboard from the boat, but again, it's all part of their job being out there trying to deal with these conditions. In fact, most of these tow guys are probably more prepared for these conditions than most boaters in general. These are the conditions they wind up out in. Most of the time when these guys are getting tows, it's because the conditions are bad, vessels are breaking down in those conditions, and they wind up out in this stuff a lot. Probably some of their busiest days that they'll have will be these bad condition days, which is odd when you think about it because these are the days where fewer boaters are out. Not as many people are on the water on a day like today, but the likelihood of something going wrong on the water is significantly increased when we have poor weather like this. So our divers made it back to the beach and they are ready to attach another line from the larger vessel to see if they have any better luck this time. But as you can tell in these images, things are turning against this crew now. The tide has started to go out significantly and almost all of this boat is now completely beached on the beach, meaning that they're going to struggle to try and get this bow pulled out. Now, most people may be wondering why they're pulling from the bow and not the stern. Well, this is actually the proper towing technique. When you're doing this, you want to try and get the bow out forward. It is much easier to pull from the bow than it is the stern. If you start pulling from that stern, especially if it's beached at all that's going to happen is you're actually going to beach it worse as the stern's just going to dig into the sand, making things a whole lot more difficult for the tow crew. And as you can tell from some of these images, they're already having a rough enough go of it and don't want to make things any more difficult than they can. But they're getting the line out to the bigger boat, going to give it one more shot. But as you'll be able to tell shortly, this is probably one of their last shots of the day. The tide has gone out so much now that if they can't get it here, they pretty much already know they're done and they're going to have to wait for the tide to come back around. So the crew throws everything at their last-ditch effort, but unfortunately, again, we see the same thing happen and the tow line snaps. Now, the crew's still not done for the day. They're going to go ahead and attach one more tow line, but they're not going to bother even trying to tow it back off again. This tow line is just to prepare for the next high tide. Unfortunately, the next high tide's at 2 a.m., so they really need to get the tow line done now during the day versus trying to get it done in the middle of the night. As long as they get the line attached now, they can go and try and re-pull it off at the next high tide. Now, we don't have images of that because it was at 2 a.m., but we were told that that actual attempt was unsuccessful at 2 a.m. It did take them several days to eventually wind up getting this boat off this beach. Now, the most important part of this is everybody wound up doing this safely. There were no injuries reported by any of the towboat crew or anybody who was originally on the vessel when the beaching happened. After they got it off, they were able to tow the vessel over to Viking's facility in Riviera Beach for inspection. Viking also released a statement on this, claiming that damage was actually very minimal to the boat, which is great news, especially considering the boat sat on the beach like this for several days. Viking did state that all the parts were ordered to fix the vessel and they fully expected the vessel to be operational and out fishing again before the new year. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, please check out our other channels. We have Wavy Boats, who does a bunch of great things down at the inlets. My channel, Broncos Guru, does some great comedy boating videos as well. And of course, we've got the Miami Boat Ramps channel that focuses on all the hilarity that happens at the boat ramps in South Florida. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.